Some of the most intriguing characters in the Bible are those in whom we see the interplay of human failure and success. Abraham is one of those characters. We read stories about his wise decisions as well as his decisions that were ill-advised, such as when he deceived foreign rulers about Sarah, an action which could have forestalled the covenant with God. Themes of failure, success, and covenant continue with Abraham's ancestors, Isaac and Jacob. Similar themes are present in the brief accounts of Sarah and Rebekah that we find in the book of Genesis. Listen as Celia Brewer Marshall describes the matriarchs of Israel. As she points out, both men and women of faith are important in the biblical covenants with God.
The call and creation of Israel that begins in Genesis 12 is commonly known as the patriarchal history, with the patriarchs being Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We do well to set the context of their stories in a patriarchal society. Ancient Near Eastern culture, or the culture in which biblical literature was shaped and formed over a millennia, was centered on the men in the family. Polygamy, a term referring to husbands having multiple wives, was a fact of family life in that culture. Women were to produce children. Barren women were a liability and were subject to easy divorce. Large families guaranteed the survival of the tribe, which was centered on the father's house, or in Hebrew, the Bet Hav. The firstborn son was most valued in the system called primogeniture. Over and against the historical context of patriarchy, however, the Bible attests to the importance of Israel's matriarchs. The covenant is issued to them as well. The Hebrew Scriptures bear witness to Sarah and Rebekah as women who partnered with God in fulfilling the covenantal promises. Let's begin with Sarah. Immediately after God first issues the covenant and the couple journeys to Canaan, Sarah's fate as a matriarch is jeopardized twice. The first episode involves the Pharaoh of Egypt, the second, a Canaanite king named Abimelech. The stories are actually doublets, meaning the basic outline of the narrative is found twice with slight changes in the characters and settings. The stories are doublets of danger, with Sarah as the victim. Both episodes occur immediately after God has promised Abraham a son. Now, what Abraham clearly didn't understand or couldn't fathom was that the promise depended on his partnership with Sarah. The first of the dangerous doublets is found in Genesis 12. Abram and Sarah go down to Egypt because of a famine back in Canaan. Abram is aware that his wife is beautiful and that the Pharaoh is powerful. Abram is also most fully aware of his desire to protect himself. His reasoning is this: should the king of Egypt decide to add Sarah to his harem, Abram's own life is at stake, and the covenant is at risk. Thus, a ruse is devised. Sarah is his sister. As is often the case when rationalizing, there is a bit of truth to this. Sarah is Abram's half-sister. This kinship arrangement was not unusual in the ancient Near East. Tribal loyalties inevitably made for some degree of intermarriage. But Sarah is also Abram's wife. This bit of information is hidden from both the Pharaoh in Egypt and later in Genesis 20 from King Abimelech in Canaan. In these deceptions, Abram attempts to save his skin while placing Sarah in jeopardy. Both times he loses her. Both times God intervenes and saves Sarah. The households of Pharaoh and Abimelech suffer from barrenness and plagues. The Pharaoh looks for reasons and uncovers the ruse. God appears to Abimelech in a dream and reveals the situation to him. While each takes Sarah into his harem, neither lays a hand on her. Both times the foreign kings act with integrity. "Why did you not tell me she was your wife?" the Pharaoh asked Abram. "What were you thinking of, that you did this thing?" Abimelech asked. And when each discovered the truth, they sent Sarah and Abraham away loaded with gifts. We can imagine the Pharaoh and the foreign king, at first unaware of their naivete, acting in good faith, then horrified, baffled by the truth of the situation. Abram's God was not pleased. Indeed, why had Abram put them in danger? The answer lies in Abram's understanding of the covenant. When he first heard the promise of a great nation, Abram did not hear what becomes clear in the narrative, that Sarah, his wife, is to be a partner in this blessing and matriarch of the promise as well. When God promises to make a mighty nation, Abram assumes the promise is made to him and to him alone. He will ensure his own safety and his own heir. Following ancient Near Eastern customs regarding childless marriages, he takes Eliezer of Damascus, who is his chief household servant, and makes Eliezer his adopted son. Later, Abram will take Hagar as a surrogate mother. While he knows he must have an heir, he does not think that Sarah is necessary. But God makes it clear that Abram and Sarah are covenantal partners. It's their son together, who will inherit the blessing. God renames Sarah in Genesis 17, verse 15. She will no longer be called my princess, but princess of a multitude. And God says, I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Isaac, the child of laughter in their old age, is the sign to Abraham and Sarah that God's promises will be worked out in spite of their long childlessness. God works through them as partners. Such was God's intent all along. The story of Rebekah begins with her betrothal to Isaac in Genesis 24. Abraham decides to find Isaac a wife back in Haran, home of his family, far away from the Canaanite peoples. Abram sends a loyal servant who devises a plan of his own. The servant will go directly to the local well, the meeting place in the ancient Near East, and ask a woman to draw water for him. If the candidate does so and offers to water his camels as well, she will have passed the betrothal test. Rebekah does just that. She acts quickly, brings water for the servant and again for the camels. She shows herself to be a young woman of great energy and courage. The servant gives her tokens of betrothal, a ring for her nose, bracelets for her arms, and she immediately runs to tell her household of the plan. She understands that a great journey awaits her. To the question of whether she will go back with the servant, she answers simply, I will. Upon her arrival and seeing Isaac from afar, she takes the initiative, she veils herself, and she comes to him. After 20 years of childlessness, Rebekah and Isaac miraculously conceive, and a struggle begins. The long-awaited pregnancy is a difficult one for her. The turmoil she feels inside is painful. Why do I live? She asks. Rebekah goes on her own to inquire of the Lord. She seeks God out to ask directly what is happening in her life. For the first time in the Bible, the text indicates that God spoke directly to the matriarch. The oracle Rebekah receives is powerful, direct, surprising. She's pregnant with twins. She will bear 2 nations, God tells her, 2 peoples who will be divided. Furthermore, the younger one will prevail over the older, stronger one. Such are the surprising ways of God. The oracle is delivered to the one who will later act to realize its purpose. It is Rebekah, who knows her own mind, who knows the mysterious plan of God, and who takes the initiative. It's likely that Isaac was unaware of the oracle. The system of primogeniture, or succession by the eldest son, was the convention practiced in ancient Near Eastern cultures. The oldest would always inherit a double portion. Isaac certainly prefers his firstborn son, Esau, to Jacob, who was second-born, likely by minutes. Esau grew up to be a man of the field and the hunt, surely a better fit in his father's mind to be the heir. The well-known story of Isaac's deception in Genesis 27 is, on one hand, an episode of trickery and intrigue. But seen from Rebekah's vantage point, we note how quickly she acts to bring about what she knows must happen. Convention must be overturned, and it must be done in haste. She uses whatever tools were available to further her purpose and God's ways. As she had once sought and received the oracle for her son's future, Rebekah now uses skins to cover Jacob's arms so that he might receive the blessing. She urges Jacob, "Obey my word as I command you." Her plan works. Isaac's intentions are thwarted, and his blessing cannot be taken back. Afterward, when she hears that Esau plans to murder Jacob, Rebekah again tells her son, "Obey my voice." She sends Jacob to her brother Laban, back in Haran, and safely out of harm's way. She knows the struggle between sons to be the struggle between nations. She knows God's oracle. She draws her own conclusions and devises a strategy. She works to preserve Jacob, the promise, and the future. God promises the patriarchs and matriarchs that by them, through them, all the families of the earth will be blessed. The particular covenant with Israel will eventually extend and encompass all peoples and nations, all the families of the earth. God's promises are sure. Beginning with the patriarchs and the matriarchs, we see how God partners with us in the realization of God's promise.